Hello, everyone. I am very excited to welcome back onto the podcast Adam Holt, CEO of AssetMap. Like we've talked about previously, Arrowroot Family Office, Wealth Management Forward, our accounting partners are starting to really utilize AssetMap as really one of the key first software providers for them to start shifting this mindset towards more of an advisory model. So I'm really excited to have Adam on today to kind of walk through the vision of AssetMap and the whys and the hows and the pain points of some of that. I think it's going to be very valuable for folks. So with that, Adam, welcome aboard and kind of take us away.
Thank you, Rob. It's always great to be here, and I really enjoyed our last podcast together. It's really kind of fun. For those of you that are on visual, you can see I'm in Philadelphia. That's an attempt at Philadelphia with the sun coming in. So sending you a nice shout out from unseasonably warm weather. Yeah, I was really excited to share with you what's been happening with all of our tax professional friends and also wealth management friends that have been finding that engagement, right? Elevating the advisor situation, the relationship between a consumer, our client, and an advisor and a professional is really where the rubber hits the road, right? And many years ago, we used to think of the point of sale environment was so critical for someone who was buying in a retail environment. But we all know from an advice delivery perspective, it's really where the client and the advisor meet that we really need to focus on that customer experience, because that really dictates what tends to kind of take us through the whole year until we see our advisors or professionals again. So it's better to be a great experience. And we've been focusing a lot on that.
Makes total sense.
So what we're going to do today actually is we're going to spend some time doing a little bit of dog and pony and showing what's been working for our financial professionals, especially in this idea of engagements. I don't know if you know, Rob, but there's been some new categories created because of technology in the financial technology space. For many years, everything either fell under CRM, or it's a customer relationship management, some kind of portfolio tool, or it was a financial planning tool, an analytical component, right? Sometimes it was in the back office and our team was doing all this work in the back office. Sometimes it was front office because it was really presentation or helping people understand. And financial planning tools tended to dominate that category. We've seen breakouts, actually what is now being called engagement or advice engagement tools, which we're proud to say we're probably the most well-known these days. It's not really financial planning. It's more how do you actually interact with the consumer at that high value moment or that meeting moment. So I'm going to share some things for those of you that can obviously see our screens. That'll be important. And thank you so much to the AFO community for having us here. We threw these themes together, and I'll read them for those on audio only. There's really been some major themes that we've been seeing. I'm really curious, Rob, what your experience has been. In the wealth management side, it has to do with change management, the experience technology stack, digital advice, and what's happening there. And of course, how do we all expand our revenue, especially given the fact that the next level of tech and robo is going to marginalize a lot of what we do by commoditizing it and reducing I think the revenue that's expected. So there's a lot of pressures. I'm curious what you're tending to see, Rob, in your world.
Yeah, absolutely. With the accounting firms that we're working with that are taking that mind shift towards advisory, it's really the first step, taking that first step. And there's a lot of hesitance, there's a lot of fear that is justified because they've been sold software that says, we're going to scale this portion of your business dramatically, we're going to do this. And the software historically, I'm talking 10 years ago, was not easy to use. It was clunky. It was on-prem. It didn't work. It was expensive. They didn't understand how to use it. And the revolution has happened for that intuitiveness. So, to come back to your earlier point, finding those pain points in the client journey and alleviating that for the client, really important. But secondarily, alleviating the journey for the advisor or the accountant that's alongside the client for that journey. And I think AssetMap does a really excellent job of alleviating those pain points for both in a very intuitive, getting started type of way, not boil the whole ocean to start off with. So, that's why we're big fans.
Thank you. Well, what's interesting when you think about this from the zoomed out view of our industry in general, both tax and wealth management and the mashups of those two professions have really, really a lot of opportunity in the crossover. We do know that consumers out there who have dealt with wealth managers have generally had relatively poor tax guidance. And we also know that those that stick on the tax guidance side exclusively don't always get the best investment advice. In fact, they tend to think, well, I've got a tax professional. I can afford to just either do DIY and do it myself, or I'll just go to my cousin who's going to sell me an annuity. And there's no context whether that serves me or doesn't serve me. It could be great, but there's no one really looking at the big picture holistically, right? The investment teams tend to look microcosm at asset allocation and maybe qualified versus non-qualified. The insurance teams tend to say, well, how much permanent life insurance can I sell you? And the banking teams tend to focus on, well, can I manage your cash and sell you a mortgage? And very few of those professionals have had the opportunity, we could even include the legal advisors, to look at what is going on in people's lives. And because they don't do that easily without some massive technology aggregation system, people just say, yeah, it just can't be done. And that understanding that both you and I come from the business, right? We've been professionals for several decades. Our attempt to solve this problem was really predicated on the fact that we just needed to focus on simplicity. Now, I tend to think these days, most of the professionals we talk to are starting to maybe not feel it, but be aware of the pressure of technology on their business. And one of the questions that we try to help people understand is, why do professionals exist in the first place? Well, why does a tax professional really exist? Why does a wealth management professional exist? And by the way, it's a profession by design. Well, we exist to help our clients make wise decisions, right? That serve them and their ideals. That's the real key. That's the purpose of a professional. And ultimately it comes down to a decision, right? There's some decision that needs to be made. And the interesting thing about these decisions, especially around finances, is they tend to be complex. And there also tends to be a cost of being wrong. And sometimes when you look at these making of decisions, for example, what's a decision that I have to make? Should I use a 529 to save for college? Relatively low complexity, relatively low cost of being wrong. I know my exits and I could read about it on the web. Okay, so that's not a really high pain point problem for which I might need a professional. But if I was going to talk to, or do you make a decision, let's say on retirement distribution planning or estate planning, or I've got a family owned business that needs to have an exit, or I'm thinking about a distribution, now all of a sudden the complexity goes high and the cost of being wrong gets really high because there's penalties if I mess it up. And there's not many do-overs. And we think that what's going to happen is in this kind of high complexity cost of being wrong, that's where the human professional is really going to thrive, continue to thrive. Because we all know that when those two conditions come up, Rob, we want a human to help us make that decision.
Absolutely. And increasingly so, both on the wealth management, on the accounting side, we've also seen folks who have made relatively simple things seem highly complex to try to guard their fees. Right. And so, the wonderful thing I love about AssetMap is it helps you to collect that data in a user-friendly way, but in a very sophisticated type of way. So a lot of accountants that we know that are advising to business owners who are thinking about selling their business or getting multiple streams of K1s, or have family members that work for their businesses and trying to make decisions about what they're going to do for all of them. A lot of accountants we work with, it takes a lot of pain to get that information correctly out of the client in a simple way to show them some actionable advice. And so again, the ability to actually simplify some things that are complicated, but not just for the sake of complication, for the sake of efficiency, clarity, and peace of mind is something that we're seeing just increase market share for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, there's no different than let's say a medical professional, right? If you're going to a medical professional, there's always ambiguity as to whether I've diagnosed the problem correctly, whether I really understand the real challenges, and you're making a probabilistic distribution or decision based upon on your experience, your credibility, and the input of the data that you have. And the challenge we've seen with financial decisions, especially as professionals are trying to help their clients, is that if they don't have a way to really understand what the context of the problem is, right? What are you dealing with? Who's important? Why is this decision important? What's the tax ramification? Is that more important, let's say, than the legal implication of ownership? Unless we have that in front of our face, we don't ever get a financial x-ray, if you will, as a professional. So in order for us as professionals to help people make a financial decision that serves them, we have to actually simplify the complexity and also reduce the cost of being wrong by being able to model this quickly and efficiently so that it forces a conversation. Because if we can't get a real feel for the client's needs to meet their goals, it's a shot in the dark based upon our model and expertise, right? So the key is, how do you get a client and a customer to feel good about that decision and to know that the professional helped them get there? So everything we focus on, Rob, at AssetMap, being people that came from that space, is how do I facilitate a conversation of meaning? And I put this on the screen, which is basically, I'll narrate it for those of you that can't see. This is what you see there is a typical consumer. Most of us have acquired some level of financial stuff, right? An IRA that our dad told us to start early on, maybe a 401k from our work. Maybe we bought life insurance when we had a kid or bought a home. Our cousin sold us that too, so we don't really understand it. We do our banking online, so we kind of have our money in play. But when other people are dependent upon us, like our family, there's a lot of stuff that gets complicated. There's long-term care and pensions and mortgages and 529s. And so the first thing that any professional has to do is organize the facts, right? Do KYC, fact gathering, We found by actually doing this visually in front of a client, by building out a visual map of their financial stuff and organizing it in a way that really made sense, we found that we're actually able to apply our intelligence in real time, ask better questions. Why is this happening? And then at the end of the day, guess what happened? The customer coveted their map. They wanted their diagram because they want to take it home, talk to their family about it, give it to their trustee, whatever it might be. And so the interesting thing about how we help the core problem that professionals all have is facing and challenges. How do you engage where you lead with advice? By starting with the facts, right? How do you get a visual context now that we have all permission in a transparent way to point that out? And this is really critical for anybody who's in the financial world today. You have to prove that you know your client, right? You have to prove it. Otherwise, you're giving me guidance out of context.
Right. I'll tell you that most accountants that we work with, that first step of fact gathering is usually the tax returns, the last 2 or 3 tax returns, which is wonderful from a compliance tax perspective to build some of this picture. But the big pain point that I see with a lot of accountants that start with that as their first fact gathering is they're like investigatory, private investigators who look at the tax return and then have to figure out, well, this K1 that was associated with this LLC, what exactly is that thing? And why are you taking income from here? And so, it is a great place to start on the accounting side. But when we start to shift to advisory, I think you're about to take us through helps to provide that foundation, not just for the tax side, but now in this holistic manner, which a lot of accountants have shied away from.
You hit it, had a nail on the head, which is the transition, and it's not that big of a transition. So I don't want to intimidate individuals to think that they have to give up process to all of a sudden go from being a tax professional to an advisor. You already know fundamentally how to do this. In general, we have seen, this is a generalization, so I recognize the limitations of it, is that the tax professionals we've dealt with highly covet and value, and of course their customers do, their technical expertise on delivering very specific guidance on tax decisions. That tends to be intimidating to most. So it feels like, oh my God, that's just beyond my capacity. It's why I need a professional in the first place. And that's a great valued, I'd pay for that all day long as a consumer of it. The challenge is that we've limited ourselves to asking highly technical information as opposed to zoom out information, which is, why are you doing this in the first place? What do you think it gives you? I know you bought that 10 years ago. Does it still actually make sense? And so the suitability, I think, of the decisions that most people are making across different lines of business, investment, insurance, tax, legal. Someone has to look at that. The interesting problem we're seeing is that most consumers have very high trust of their tax professionals' ability to help them make good, intelligent, fact-based decisions. But they don't give all the facts to the same person. And the reason is because the tax professionals don't typically ask about, well, tell me about your insurance policies and tell me about the income sources you have and what kind of control you have over the income and how it's distributed. They're usually seeing this in kind of arrears post decision. In other words, tax return time, I get all these 1099s and 1098s, and I get all of it, and then I'm reactive. But what if we could create an environment where a tax professional could be, an accountant could be proactive by seeing everything, looking at the financial x-ray, and then helping people make better decisions going forward that had a net effect on where they're getting their compensation, okay? That's really the key. Whether it is investment, insurance, or tax, it doesn't matter. It should be contextual to what's going on. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We tend to care a lot about how you get data in, so I'm going to show you a cool way to accelerate this entire process. And of course, identifying opportunities to help people shouldn't be complicated. It shouldn't require a PhD. So let me show you how we can do this, and we can even delegate this to our junior staff so that we can bring it up to our highest value of time. We found a way to actually accelerate what we call onboarding of new prospects and sometimes existing clients by using technology selectively. One of the things we have found, Rob, is that many clients of tax professionals, accountants, they get a packet, usually around tax time, 2 months before tax time or deadlines. And it's usually a massive packet depending upon how much you've got going on in your life. Businesses, trusts, are we talking about 1099s, you got employees, et cetera, et cetera. So we all have gotten these packets before. They're not fun. They're intimidating, okay? Most consumers are thinking, why am I paying you thousands of dollars so I can fill out all your paperwork? We know that plenty of professionals have gotten the proverbial shoebox of stuff. Then you got to weed through it. It's just brutal, right? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, it still happens. It still happens, right? It still happens today. Yeah, it still does.
Well, we found a way to use this. I don't know if you saw the Super Bowl recently, but a QR code for Coinbase was thrown about. It made a huge splash in terms of getting people to take action. We've been doing this for quite a while, even before Coinbase. But what we learned is that if a professional before the meeting or before an engagement sends a link to the consumer, they're very highly likely to complete it if they think that it's going to help accelerate the conversation or save them money or just prepare them to be ready for this meeting. And we found a way to gamify this process by literally sending a link. Customers or prospects will literally fill this out on their iPhone. They can do it in 10, 15 minutes. Don't give me the details. I don't want to know to the penny. I'm not asking for, it's tax IDs. I'm not asking for any of that stuff. Who's in your family? What kind of financial decisions are you making right now? Very round numbers, round to the nearest 10,000. I don't care, because we need to know that these things exist. And what that does is it builds, an alert goes to the professional and it builds what we call an asset map. And all of our intellectual properties around how do you create a singular customized visualization that is standardized, but allows to work for any individual and complexity, that will literally show their entire life on one page. So let me show you what I mean. We think about 5 core elements of data, right? The ones that matter most are, number 1, who is in your family, who matters, and what are the legal entities that are considered part of your financial household, if you will. That's your typical, in America, it's 2-person household. Maybe they're married, maybe they're not these days. Maybe it's same sex, it doesn't matter. Maybe there are children or dependents. Maybe there are parents involved, first generation, there's a third generation. Maybe there's other family members, they're business partners. I bought a house with my brother. We have some financial obligations, companies, trusts, charities, anything you can think of that could either own, benefit from, or control a financial instrument. That's your financial household. Those are the people and entities, legal entities, all right? The second thing that we focus on highly is where are the income sources and what are the cash flows coming into the household. We can also handle out, but very often it's important to know what is coming into the household. What assets are controlled by each person? What's their tax status? Where are they located? What's their approximate value? What do we call those things, right? An IRA, a 401k, a brokerage account, 529, a business interest. What does that look like for both parties? And can we see a balance sheet and an income statement smashed together on top of a net worth statement, including also their insurance policies at the top that protect them? And effectively, we can put every financial instrument in those four categories on one visualization where we know where is everything, what's it called, what's it worth, who controls it, and we know their tax position. When I say tax position, I'm talking about the qualification status, right? We know that life insurance has certain tax benefits. We know what real estate tax implications are depending upon your local jurisdiction. And so you probably already know this if you're a tax professional, right? So what we got here, Rob, is we have a single visualization of, let's say, the Jenkins family here, all the people that matter to them, where all their financial stuff is buried, and who controls that decision. Do you see how that's useful?
One page. I think one of the first conversations you said was when you were building this, when you were in the industry as a financial planner and stuff, if it, you wanted to get really relevant data into one page, right? And I just want accountants to realize how powerful that is, to have it laid out in a kind of visual manner that's easier to understand and then lead into next part of the conversation. Yeah. It sounds like it may just be like a simple thing to do. Most accountants that we're working with right now are trying to do something like this in Excel or a presentation, and spending a lot of time in that creation process that could be streamlined for something like this. But from the client perspective, we've had an enormous kind of response of, can I take that, like you said earlier, can I take that home with me? This is really helpful for me to understand, to have this on one page.
Oh, it's really, I can't say it enough. Now, of course, I'm obviously biased, but I've also seen it now thousands of times. And the implication of this is that when you put a professional's eyes on the right financial x-ray, they see things that nobody else sees. The consumer might see, okay, there's a lot of complexity on the left. Why is all these assets, or why does Christine have so many more assets than Tim? Well, it's because she is a business and she's also a teacher and she's got part-time, right? So she's got a lot of complexity. She's dealing with it emotionally completely different than Tim is, who's employed by an employer and he's got basic, stock options and so forth. His life is more manageable. You can actually understand how complexity affects them even emotionally. You might also see redundancy. Why do you have 3 or 4 qualified accounts? Why don't you commingle them? They're all doing different things. Can I bring in my wealth management team to just clean this up? Sometimes the real emotional pain points of financial decisions is just the clutter, right? It's just too much. Or we call this fix and fill. Some professionals would say, well, gosh, I noticed you have no long-term care insurance. You don't have enough money to self-insure. Is that intentional? Or you just no one ever told you should do that? Or why do you own this annuity in a qualified plan? You're basically getting no benefit from this on the tax. You're getting dual tax benefit, but you're paying for it. Like, you don't get any real benefit, right? So, I see that you have this income source. You didn't tell me you had this side income source. I could use that and put that into a qualified plan and reduce the tax burden. I mean, so the thing is that a professional sees different things than the consumer. And if they're a tax professional, they tend to see, Rob, the tax implications versus an insurance professional or an investment, right? They tend to ask better questions around that topic specifically. So I can't undersell the implication of how it elevates our ability to apply our professional experience and intelligence when you give me the picture. Because now I know what questions to ask, or I know where we need to prioritize. I hope that makes sense.
And I will also underline, a lot of accountants are frightened by giving some of this advice on some of these other subject matters that they're not experts in. And that's okay. And in our experience, if they're using something like AssetMap, now they have a very clear picture to be able to give to an Arrowroot or another RIA or an advisor they work with, or their insurance partner that they're working with, to say, hey, we've got this client, we've got this new prospect, here's the asset map of what's going on here. And they can really then leverage much more efficiently that other professionals' opinions to help them. So I really want to underscore that, because that's a big fear factor for accountants. They say, great, I've got this. I don't want to have to be telling them the difference between an individual 401k and a SEP IRA. I don't want to be doing that, giving that kind of advice. And I want to underline, you don't have to. Getting started with this thing is going to make it better with the people you're working with already, and help you to identify people that you want to work with, because they're giving you better opinions, because you're giving them information much cleaner.
Oh, that's beautifully said. I'm glad you mentioned it. I probably would have forgotten to talk about it, because there's very often times when we've had our tax professional friends that have said, you know what, I want to be the one that brings this up with the client because they look to me. I don't want to necessarily outsource it. So they talk to our investment friends who have AssetMap, they collaborate and they say, what do you see? How would you position this? What are the real pain points? Can you give me market commentary so that I can go back and start the conversation? Because the client really has a relationship with me. I'm not really ready to offload it yet, or I am. I need to bring you in. I need you to run shotgun on this meeting and just give us the context. I want to sit on the same side of the table as the client. Where we do see tax professionals are really great is they ask great, challenging questions. They say, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why? That's too expensive. Why are you doing that? And they get the opportunity to challenge from a common sense perspective. Not necessarily, they don't have to be the professional who knows wealth management fully. They could just be the client advocate, which is what the client really actually is looking for. They're looking for someone to help me. Can I have a tour guide here who's going to tell me, go to this restaurant, not this restaurant, because I don't want to have a stomach ache, right? So that's what they're looking for. And I think that it's a missed opportunity if we can't help expand where I think professionals can obviously work. Let me show you some other cool stuff that we've been doing, which I think is fun. Sometimes when we're with families, we want to talk about the kids. We rarely get an opportunity to talk about generation, let's say, generation 2. What are they doing? Does it make sense? And I point this out to you because we've seen a lot of conversations come up around, how do I expand the relationship with my current client to address the fact that eventually maybe they're aging and I want to work with the next generation and I want to be the family tax or wealth professional. Because we all know eventually we're probably trying to grow our businesses or at least retain what we have. And so what if I could just switch the view and now say, well, here's the kids, here's what they're doing. We should probably bring them in. Let's talk about this. They got to go into college. Or, you have a business. Let's put your business on the screen. Let's talk about your business partner and the relationship with that and your company. And so instead of relying on, let's say, Xero or QuickBooks or some kind of platform that's going to show the balance sheet, maybe we need to see this differently. Why do we have I see you have this huge 401k that's on your balance sheet. What about the equipment? And is that insured? And I know you have a small business loan. Are you personally responsible for that? There are some techniques and strategies that can be used here to give the client a better outcome, but not if we don't get the opportunity to talk about it. And that's what this is doing, whether we're talking to, Nana, who set up a trust, nobody understands what she did, but we're going to be responsible for managing it. And we're dealing with crummy powers and there's a gift tax return, but nobody told me because they didn't think I needed to know. So the point is that sometimes by being the purveyor of simplicity, or at least visualization of the current state, Rob, that gives the professional much more influence to help them make better decisions. And we just see it again and again as like a big eye opener, like, oh, I didn't even know you do this stuff. And it allows the professional to expand their revenue to multiple lines of services.
Absolutely. The lowest hanging fruit we've seen for accountants that have been using this is, one, they end up doing more tax work for all the other entities that are all out there that need to be done, cleaning up, making sure their compliance is better. So increasing their existing business. And the second is on retirement accounts, personal, business retirement accounts, cash balance plans that, there isn't a customer out there that doesn't want to save on their taxes. And a lot of accountants work that into their workflow right now, but that's some of the lowest hanging fruit that AssetMap has been able to provide. You have this business over here, you don't have a 401k associated with any of your other stuff. Have you thought about maybe doing a SEP IRA or a 401k, or are you happy with your 401k at paychecks. I'm not going to say, we got lots of folks out there that use paychecks and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
is that the best experience? And are you looking for something else that's maybe connected directly? You don't have to do any of the manual. So it, again, highlighting the fact that accountants don't need to be experts on all of this stuff. But I think you pinpointed something that's really important, which is it can help to provide a path for you to start to include these services at your own pace, much more efficiently.
That is true. Yeah, that's right. We don't have to do everything. We just have to be cognizant because we just don't know what we don't know. And I think from a professional's perspective, the more information you give us, it's not always better. It's how we can actually digest that information too, because again, it's complex. One of the interesting things that we've noticed is a problem, Rob, for a lot of professionals. We're actually rolling this out next week. It's actually called Signals. It was an attempt to say, if we were to look at a household mathematically, there's certain types of trends that you would tend to see almost algorithmically that you could apply to pretty much everybody. For example, the relationship between how much earned income they make and their current life insurance coverage, right? There's a relationship there, which might indicate to us whether this would be a concern if, God forbid, we lost them yesterday. How would that leave the survivors? Or do they have enough liquidity if they need to write a big check because their kid crashed a car and the insurance company's not covering it, right? These emergency reserves ideas. So we came up with this concept called Signals. And we think of it as the check engine light diagnostic for the six financial fire drills that all of us might experience, unfortunately, in our lifetime. And I'll tell them to you because they're really transferable. And for those of you that are in the professional marketplace that actually deal with clients, it's a real fun question to ask. What's the household plan to deal with the following 6 events that typically will disrupt all of our good planning? Okay, ready? Liquidity. They all start with the letter L. Liquidity. I have to write a big check. Long-term disability. I can't work. Loss of life. I can't do anything. Okay. Yep. Long-term care. Nobody will let me do anything.
Yep.
Longevity. I live too long, right? I outlive my money. And legal liabilities. There are tax, right? Do I have to structure this household so that it protects from, my kid's next bad marriage, or I've got a lot of rental properties and someone's going to sue me, right? Do we need to think about these events? Now, the interesting thing is most of us know this by heart, right? We know, I guess I got to protect my family if I die too early. The funny thing is we're seeing professionals don't want to talk about these things because either they don't get paid by solving those problems, right? They're not insurance salesmen, or they don't do financial planning. And instead, we're always talking about the here and now present on the offense, which is, can I grow my money? Can I make good decisions going forward? And as a result, we send a lot of advisors are not talking about these knockout problems. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to start selling the products or solutions that work here. We don't really, that's not the point. The point is to tell the client, be proactive and say, by the way, there's a red light on these 3 areas, according to my system. It could be wrong. It's a system. It doesn't really know you like I do, but it means we should probably check it out or call somebody, right? It's like the general practitioner looking at the x-ray and saying, wait, I see this dark spot on the x-ray. Forget the broken bone over here. What is this? Let's go have a specialist look at this and tell us whether this is just, something was stuck on the machine or it's a problem and we need to go explore. Okay. So the key here is to enable professionals to now say, hey, red light, let's go check out and see if that's real or just, bogus. Like there's a loose wire. You see the value of that?
Absolutely. We say it all the time that this family office holistic model, there is no better practitioner in that model of the future than accountants today. And some of these areas, like you said, are frightening even for wealth managers or financial planners to address, right? But it is highly valuable because what you're really providing to clients are clarity and peace of mind, right? And having that conversation. And so, love AssetMap system to be able to highlight some of these things as something to even just touch on with people. And a lot of times nothing is actionable. Yeah, we've thought about that and this is why we haven't done it, but it does show that proactive nature that accountant is becoming that center of influence, that quarterback that they can rely on for information like that.
Yeah, and the good thing about something like this is you don't have to do anything. It's just
Right.
running in the background. So
Yeah.
you change your data, you change
Yeah.
things over time. It'll constantly be changing. So you're getting this constant feedback that you've got enough oil in the car or you don't. And that's when you want to take some action. But some people do obviously ignore their tire pressure is low. They're like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just the cold weather. So I think the point is that we have to create that capacity. And some of the other things that I know that many of you are really kind of high-end professionals, you really understand, is we can also overlay what your peers have on an asset map. And this is a really unique process that all of our professional subscribers actually can customize. So when you're working with organizations that have high or deep intelligence as to what peers are doing, for example, why don't we overlay what a boomer is also doing, a baby boomer or an X-Gen, or maybe a business owner who owns real estate, who has a family-owned business, right? That's a unique combination. If you want to know what your peers do, let me overlay what they're doing on top of your map so you can see where it fits. That's one of the challenges we've seen with a lot of complex households, is that people have heard of these techniques, but they don't understand where it fits and who should it be with. And so they just get intimidated out of the whole thing, and it's complex. They're like, let me just go back to doing what I was doing. So the fun part about this is we've been able to use this as a communication tool to say, by the way, I noticed this is missing basic stuff like, oh, you're missing life insurance. This is where we go. Or maybe you need a deferred comp, or maybe you need a buy sell, or maybe there's some kind of other strategy we should be thinking about. And it's fully open architecture, so we can create that as it were. And for those of us that like to actually communicate and draw, we enable drawing on every asset map, on every device. So you can literally just point out and circle stuff and say, we need to fix this. This is what needs time. I wanted to share this with you. I'm kind of paying attention to our time. In the next few minutes, I wanted to show Rob what we've been working on recently. It's fully available. It's been around for a couple of years, but we've been building on our planning engine. I found that for the most part, many of the professionals, even those in the wealth management space, just don't have the time or attention span to run a full financial plan. And so that's why they're not doing it. If the client's not paying them an extra $2,000-3,000, they're not inclined to go spend 10 hours behind a computer and model out their retirement, and then it changes tomorrow because the client forgot to tell us something, right? So the point is that we've seen a really kind of a hesitancy recently for tax professionals to get into financial planning. And so what we did is we redesigned the concept to say, what are you really trying to do here? You're trying to tell a client, are they okay? And do you have the math back up to say they've funded enough or they haven't funded? If they haven't funded enough and there's a deficit in funding for a project like retirement or education funding or premature loss of life, right? If there's a deficit, tell me what it's going to cost to fund it right now. How much capital am I short? And if I had to finance it, AKA save to fund it over time, how much do I need to save? So most clients just want to know that, like, am I on track? 77% funded for retirement. You got to save $4,000 a month, and we have to figure out a way to get your investment guys to get the 5% net return, net of expenses. How are we going to do that? Let's talk about how we're going to execute that. And that's a more effective thing if I could do that in one page in 30 seconds. Because the key to that is that for those of us that are technical, we can easily show people the cooking and the cookbook. They really just want to see the meal, right? They don't want to know how you made it. They want to know, are they okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important that we now are enabling a lot of professionals to now approach it from this standpoint. Can I just run needs analysis, pseudo financial planning in a way that's going to make me look good, is understood by the client, and of course is fast. So can I do that literally in 30, 40 seconds? Yes, you can do that live with a client, right on screen sharing, or do behind the scenes and then send it to them. Really effective at starting the right conversations. And of course, as you already mentioned, delivering conceptual value has to be on one page, right? No more 80-page reports. Nobody's reading it. They don't have time. They don't have the attention span. They need something that's usable, can go in their drawer with their wills, with their statements. It can be a treasure map for the family, and that's branded to the professionals who they trust. And that's really critical, is that if it's not branded for the experience of your client, that's back to the professional, it's a missed opportunity, if you will.
Yeah. And going to your point about showing your progress about reaching some of your financial goals, a lot of the accountants, they get asked the question by their clients, I've got this advisor, here's all my money, and here are the goals that I'm doing. is he doing or she doing right by us? And so using folks like yourself or Riskalyze or some of our other partners that we've worked with, you know, again, the accountant doesn't need to be the one saying, yes, that guy's doing or gal's doing the right thing, or no, they're not doing the right thing. They can load it onto some of these systems to be able to AssetMap, say, okay, well, let's see what you're invested in. Here's what our kind of expected return of what is being shown. You just told me about this goal. My data says, yeah, your guy's doing a good job, or, you know, and we're on track to try to hit your goal. Or, you know what, you're invested all in fixed income and you assume that you're going to live off of this for the rest of your life. No, you know, you should probably have a conversation with them about it. Bring us in, we can talk about it. Or, you know, we should have a conversation about it. So again, that clarity for folks without the 100-page Excel report is valuable, not just to the client, but also for that accounting professional or advisor.
No question. And you know, this changes over time from your own personal experience. So the reality is that we can't change the past, right? So looking at past performance is a reason why it is what it is. And I don't know what's going to happen in the future. All I know is right now, what decisions can we make? So the asset map, in a sense, was to try to say, okay, here's a visualization of all the choices we're making right now. Some of those are active decisions. Some of those are indecisions. Okay. That's a decision. Okay. At the core root of that word. And we need to make sure that it's intentional and it serves us. So when we look at this map, everything on here exists because it makes sense to exist, as opposed to just basically wasting money and time or leaving us exposed. And the key is that we need to, more than ever, the consumers in the United States need professionals who are going to have the guts to be proactive and tell them, I see this, it doesn't serve you, let's ask questions about it, because they don't always know that it's a pain point and know that you have expertise around it. So find ways to do that. This is one way to create engagement around that. I'll leave you with this idea that, you know, in terms of how advisors are engaging with their clients anymore. We all know we used to meet with them face to face. Some of us will go back to that. Some are using digital screens. And of course, some people did go to mobile for a brief moment. But I know many of us that are using screen sharing to interact with our clients. This is not going away. For what it's worth, our high-end wealth planning firm literally did 90% of our meetings over remote for the last 10 years. It's kind of interesting to see how it's important that we all recognize that how we interact with our customers has to be fluid. We have to handle some in paper, some that are snowboarding in Florida, some that are basically, going to want to be in mobile, and we have to be able to work with the way that they work. Otherwise, we're not going to be relevant. So this was really designed to work in all four of those modalities. And it's been interesting to see how we know that this process is taking off. So if you want to be part of it, certainly, this is something that really you got to explore. Engagement is changing the way financial planning is done. Right now, AssetMap is the highest rated financial planning tool, and we're not a financial planning tool. The movement towards advice engagement doesn't have to be financial planning. Despite being a CFP and a recovering financial planner myself, for those of us that are in the tax world, we don't have to be a financial planner to help people make better financial decisions. We have to engage around advice and enable that process. And that's really the key to this whole thing. I'm excited for what you guys are doing at Arrowroot, and I think it's really quite amazing.
It's amazing. I really appreciate that, Adam. And like we always say, denial is not a business strategy. And so, for accountants out there, they really are the best kind of holistic advisors of the future. And if they're not starting to think about these things, or at least start to dip their toe in it, they have to understand that others will. And, to your earlier point, there is, the market here of clients that want kind of better advice, better clarity from their professionals, tax or wealth management or both. That's everyone. You know, no one has ever met a client that says, you know what, I don't necessarily want to understand or have better clarity about what my position is. I want to have less confidence in my advisor. So it's literally everyone out there in the marketplace. So I really appreciate it. You know, AFO Wealth Management Forward is working with AssetMap as really one of the first things that we start to integrate accountants into, to start to bridge them towards making some of these decisions for themselves, for their clients, for their business. So want to, you know, say thank you for all of that. You know, for accountants that are just interested in just kind of getting started, playing with it, which is really how we got started, and we loved it. Yeah. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, look, the easiest way is, of course, you can Google it, but assetmap.com has plenty of ways for you to get engaged with us. The best thing to do, of course, is to run a demo, right? Is to go and get involved. We'll be putting up some unique URLs, which will tie to this program, so that you can follow those links in the context or the text. For a direct way to get a scheduled demo. But that's the first thing to do. Schedule a demo, see if it's right for you, ask the questions that are appropriate. Does it integrate with the tools I use? We integrate with 15 or so tools. You've mentioned several of them, to get the data in, get the data out. I think it's one of those things you just need to experience. And we do have I think a 30-day money back guarantee for those of you that are really just triers. You got to just use it with a client once or twice and you'll see it. I warn you now, it's addictive. Okay. Simplicity and clarity is addictive. So I'm telling you up front, if you walk in this door, you will generate more revenue and you'll create more delight. And if you don't, then someone else will do it with your clients. So that's not going to be good for you.
Full disclosure. Full disclosure. Well, Adam, again, appreciate all the time that you've given to us today and in the past. Looking forward to having more conversations as AssetMap continues down this mission of helping advisors, accounting professionals, and clients to make that experience better, more efficient for everyone. So really appreciate your time today and looking forward to having you back on sometime soon.
Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.